Hey, what's up? I'm going to be talking about single motherhood in Kenya. Here in Nairobi, Kenya, there's an article I found. I'm going to read it for you guys. And it's a topic that's come up. People wonder, is it nature over nurture? Because you look at the place in the United States of America, and the black community there has the highest rate of single motherhood out of any demographic group in the United States of America. Now, there's different questions of that because you can just look, okay, sub-Saharan Africans, do they also have a high single motherhood rate? And from what I've seen from the people that I know, it is not that high. People have nuclear families, are married and things like that, don't have children outside of wedlock. But you look at where African Americans live, and the majority of them do live in urban areas using a lot of welfare and things like that. So I've always thought there's not that much welfare here in Kenya, so it's different. So it doesn't necessarily work in that kind of way. But now, is it people coming to cities? Is it the welfare? And in this article, it's going to go into more of those things. I have one of my viewers, my boy Derek, who was mentioned, and he said, okay, one of the things he did like was when I would read those Sunday over there and read the stuff about that's happening in different places. So I think I'm going to start doing this series more of just reading articles of things that I want to read anyway, that I may have some thoughts while reading that you may find interesting, and I'll be doing some of these videos more. Anyway, getting into the video. So into the article now, and this is going to be from the Daily Nation, which is one of the two major newspapers here in Kenya. It's the Daily Nation and the Standard. They cover their entire country. There's some more local ones. Nairobi, Kenya is the capital. Nairobi is the capital of Kenya. So there's the Nairobi and there's some other newspapers that jockey for position here in Nairobi. When you're talking about the full country, it's the two newspapers. And they have a pretty decent online presence. Now I'm going to be reading this article that's entitled more women become single mothers as men abandon family roles. Now, that's why I titled this video, as you may have seen, talking about single motherhood on the rise in Kenya and who is to blame. One of my general things I've realized about life and think about life is most problems exist not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. Like in this situation, single parenthood in general seems to be less effective than having two parents. That's a thing that I think most people can agree on. It's not about single motherhood or single parenthood being a problem. And when you talk about single motherhood, it seems to be around the world that it happens to be the mothers that keep the kids. Here in Kenya, I don't think it's going to be as strong a situation where they're saying the courts, like in the United States of America, award custody to the mothers now in about 80% of the situations. Here, I'm assuming you're going to find a lot of these cases don't involve courts. But why is that occurring in this country? Why is it occurring in this culture? Why is it occurring in this society? So I think the problem we can agree on. Kids need as positive an environment to grow up in as possible. If one parent is good, then two parents is better. Two parents and a strong, loving family around them and friends that support that is even better. A good, solid community where they can be safe outside, and that is even more better. So with some of these things, the reason I'm reading these things, I think people have stories to tell. And as I said, problems occur when we don't define things in certain ways. Sharing information, we can find better ways to understand things. And maybe from seeing what's going on here, you can understand what's going on where you are, or somebody from somewhere else might be able to hear this and have a solution that somebody who's here going through those problems wouldn't have a solution for and be able to share. So in that, with that in mind, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I'm going to be reading more of these things, sharing these things out there. And this is also for me to share with other people. And if you find this worthwhile, also share it with other people. Okay, into the reading. So there will be links below to this article that you guys can actually check out and read for yourself and also share with other people. But so I'm going to be explaining if there's actual images on the screen and other things, and there will be small asides as I go in, but I'll try to notify you when I'm getting actually back to that direct reading. I might eventually get up my voice and do certain voices and things like that, but let's see how it goes. So it opens up with a photo of Danish Ochieng, sorry, of Miss Angelina Nandwa, who is the founder of Single Mothers Association of Kenya. And as I mentioned, Single Mothers Association of Kenya, I am assuming there is no Single Fathers Association of Kenya, but you can, I think from the way this article is, maybe they're taking this angle, but they're talking about the men abandoning the family roles. Well, here we get into it. The article is by Kenfrey Kiberenge, and this is in summary of it before we get into the reading. The Pan-African study by two Canadian sociologists shows that Kenya has one of the highest levels of children born out of wedlock on the continent. And some comments on this, the whole situation of talking about how colonialists have come, white people, the Europeans, the Wazungus, which is just essentially just means white people, have come to Kenya and ruining the place in certain ways. Certain cultures have different values about certain things. There's definitely a lot of negative things that happened in the past in any culture, whether it was from cultures outside or not. People were just crappier in the past. We're better today. So I don't think we should carry on. We should be aware of those bad things and avoid them, but don't just completely wipe out certain things. Because why does it take two Canadian sociologists to come here and do that research? Why do they care? I mean, Canada's not perfect. It's not like Canada's set, but we have this situation where they come in and they're doing studies. And with the way this goes, maybe we're going to find out that they care for different ways, for different kind of globalist kind of agendas and things like that. But let's see what they do. And I think that happens sometimes. People come from other countries, go to one country and see something's wrong and say something and might change, or they come in there and make something wrong. But these things happen. Okay, so the trend is also likely to cause head scratching among scholars to determine who is to blame for this phenomenon and why Kenya is faring far worse than other countries in Africa. So, yeah, again, we're talking about the blame. But with the actual article, it's talking about, with the title, it's already gone with fathers are abandoning the families and men are abandoning. So that's setting some blame. In Kenya, the most affected are women in their late teens and early 20s who are increasingly being left to raise children single-handedly after their male partners flee. So the late teens, that's a bit ill right there. And I think this is, by hearing that, I think we're also going to be discussing things in rural Kenya. And as I've said, it could just be self-selecting from the people that I know. The African Americans I know are not into single parenthood. The black people I know, the Kenyans I know here, are not that high into single parenthood. So this could just be a different thing. People could be talking about poverty. I think with my group of people that I know, I'm probably self-selecting into people who are at least middle class in any environment that they're in, most of them. I do know people in different classes who are at the top of the top and people who are at the bottom of the bottom, but I've seen different things and have a different group of people, but it might just be the culture of the people, the mentality of the people that I associate with. Okay, so Professor Clark argues that single motherhood is responsible for poor outcomes among children. That one we can agree to. Single parenthood in the African American community is absurdly high. And you look at the figures and it's actually been going higher and higher and higher after they've gotten out of civil rights. Even you go further back and once the slaves were freed, even with that time, with all that strife those communities and those cultures and those demographics were under, they still had stronger families. There's some stories of fathers and people going across miles, walking across states in order to find their family in order to have that family together. And then you've just seen the single parenthood rate just go higher and higher and higher, and it's correlated with the whole situation of welfare use going higher and higher and higher. And you go across the board, across different demographics, across different races, and you see that welfare thing. You go to jails and you see the actual outcomes of this. Why are 75% plus of people in jail from single parenthood households? And when you're talking about single parenthood, that is synonymous with single motherhood. And why is that also happening here in Kenya? And let's see if there's actual situations in there to explain it. 6 of every 10 women are likely to be single mothers by the time they reach 45, one of the highest rates of single-parent families in Africa. According to new research that reveals an astounding new face of the Kenyan family, an increasing number of women are drawn into single parenthood as more men abandon their traditional role as providers for their children. An array of factors including irresponsible fathers, peer pressure, and the struggle to cope with modernization are blamed for the trend, in which 3 in 10 Kenyan girls become pregnant before the age of 18. Okay, this is something that I hadn't had numbers on, that I've actually discussed before in comparison to the African American community, to the black community, and wondering why is it about those places. And I think this is more tied into where you find black people in the United States of America versus just in general where they are. They're in those big cities, in those certain communities. There is the welfare state, there is that kind of support, there is this lack. And there was this other disturbing situation about how there might be an increase of inbreeding because you have these situations where this man will go around and impregnate many women and then they won't be around in the family and then the mother doesn't tell them or doesn't even know who the father of the kid is. And then those kids grow up and they get older and then you find both people have grown up from different single parents, because that man might even leave and go to like a hood in like a neighboring city, and then they somehow meet, and you're like, oh, this person's not from my hood. Maybe there's no possible way that I actually related to this person. But then it turns out the dad was in both cities, and so there's big problems coming up with this thing, and it's a horrible situation. But here talking about which 3 in 10 Kenyan girls before pregnant before the age of 18. Now there are situations where some of these girls will also becoming pregnant before the age of 18 out of wedlock doesn't mean you'll be a single parent the whole time. You family can come together and get into a situation where they still have that pressure where they can say, oh, you're going to be the parent of this child. Like I said, I personally know at least one example of recent that I can think of where the guy got the girl pregnant outside of wedlock, and their families came together and they said, okay, they already knew each other, they were friends, they were hooking up, and they said, let's come together and actually raise this kid together, and they got married after she was pregnant. So that still happens, and I don't know how much that is happening, how much that will be figured in to this thing. But as you see before, they're saying, wondering who's actually to blame in this situation. So I hope they don't just stick to this whole fathers are to blame. They're already talking about women are drawn into single parenthood. But couldn't you also say the men are drawn into abandonment of kids? Why isn't that the kind of thing? Why is the women's choice of being with these people in a different way? They're being tricked into it, whereas the men are looked at, oh, we come in here knowing completely well what we're going to need to do, who this person is, if I want to stay with them, and whatever. Okay, back into the reading. The Pan-African study by 2 Canadian sociologists shows that Kenya has one of the highest levels of children born out of wedlock on the continent. Sociologists warn that this trend could have a deep impact on society because studies in other parts of the world have shown that a significant number of children brought up in single-parent families have lower life prospects than their peers brought up in 2-parent families. Pastor Simon Bevy of Mavuna Church, who runs a program called Man Enough, says he is worried that the trend will continue because women are internalizing the gospel of freedom of choice. This is a quote by the pastor. The modern Kenyan will opt out of marriage if confronted by little trouble, he argues. This was not the case with our parents, who remained in their unions amongst bigger challenges. Okay, I don't know what that accent was. That accent was like weird European. Should I go into something African? I don't know if this man speaks more African accent. But anyway, so that was a guy. And here with the pastor, the church is big here. I don't know if this is complete. They just had a constitution. There is some kind of ostensible separation of church and state, but it's not even as murky as it is in the United States of America, where I'm just going to post a video. I just saw something with Nancy Pelosi being like, I'm a Catholic. How dare you talk to me about being hateful and things like that. Donald Trump has to go around to the churches, has to get the evangelist groups and things like this. I don't think an American president, I think there's going to be a gay American president before there's going to be an atheist American president. Just put that. I mean, you can check that out. I think that's going to happen. This whole idea that Christians are under attack. Now, Christianity is well and strong in the strongest communities and cultures and civilizations. Christianity still has a place, a protected place. It's still tax exempt in situations like that. It has a protected place, and in society, even though there are less people claiming they believe, it is not under attack like some people claim that it is under attack. But you have a lot of the community here where people go directly to churches. You see presidential candidates, politicians kneeling down in churches and things like that. It's a common thing. It's very big in the community. The churches and different kinds of churches are involved in a lot of social programs. And you see here he's putting that religious aspect on it, where he's saying, oh, this is freedom of choice, gospel of freedom of choice. How is that a bad thing? It's just, I can't live in a culture where people are talking about internalizing the gospel of freedom of choice is a negative thing. No. I mean, I'm all for holding people responsible for the actions that they choose to do. Actions have results. But freedom of choice is a positive thing. So it could just be his phrasing in this kind of situation, but he is tying this where he's saying unions amongst bigger challenges. And with that part, I do agree. Some people are avoiding getting married. Some people are avoiding having kids, saying, oh, it's such a dangerous world. It's such a tough world that we live in now. I'm like, hey, people were having kids during World War II. 100 years ago, this is 2019 right now, going into 2020 in the United States of America. That was around the Great Depression. People still had kids. So this whole idea that money is tight, I agree with that. The state is massive. Taxation is massive. It's an issue. People have different ideas of what they expect to have for their kids, how they want to be able to do things for their kids. But that doesn't mean you can't find a female. If you're a female, you can't find a male if you want to start a family in that traditional sense, and find each other and talk and say, look, we're going to work in this way. Even if it means we move out to this location to get to this place where we can afford it better. Think about the things that you can do, and I think you can find ways. There's a lot of people out there who I think would make great parents who have chosen not to for things that I don't necessarily agree with. Okay, back into the reading. The survey conducted last year by Professor Shelley Clark, an associate professor of sociology at Canada's McGill University, and Professor Dana Hamplova from Prague Charles University and the Institute of Sociology, found Kenyan women have a 59.5% chance of being a single mother by the age of 45, either through premarital birth or dissolution of a union. The research, believed to be the first of its kind carried out in the country, also established that about 30% of women in Kenya are giving birth before they're married. Comparatively, only 18% of women give birth before marriage in Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and 5% in Ethiopia, and slightly more than 10% in Malawi. Now, I don't know why they're picking these countries. Tanzania is right next to Kenya, it borders Kenya. Zimbabwe has a lot of issues. Zimbabwe is a mess of a country right now. They were just talking about how 45% of the country right now is on threat of starvation due to majority mismanagement of the government with Mugabe, who is a longtime dictator who I think passed away recently. But that country is a mess. It was doing well. There's very racist people out there, big movement against white people. The white people that were there saying and as I was mentioning before, these white people have come to Kenya and they're doing the research. There might be some questions of why they're doing it. Institute of Sociology, how much money is being spent, how much are they getting on this to actually come out and do this first study here? Are they not studying? Anyway, but all these things, we can question that. But when it comes down to it, these people are picking these countries. What's with these countries? Ethiopia is close to here too, Malawi. So these are kind of Central African, Eastern African kind of countries in the same area. But what's the population numbers? It's 45 million here in Kenya. Not going to check, but you can check out and see, are they the same? Is the resources the same? I think there's also a big effect of who colonized them and the things like that. There's a lot of situations that you can count. And as I mentioned, the difference between living in Nairobi, the capital city, which is an international city equivalent and still has a lot of amenities, versus the rural areas, it's not the same as people in Europe, people in the United States of America, people in Canada, people in developed places where they look like, oh, the people in the countryside. Even though when I went to the countryside, I was living in West Virginia for college and university, I walked around and it felt a bit like, oh, this is sort of like being in Kenya, in rural Kenya, except the people speak English, you have paved roads, you have brick buildings, and you have electricity. But it has a general feel of that, the communal feel. But when you actually come down to it, just having those paved roads, just having that electricity, just having running water, having access to information that they have, changes things in a certain way. Where you're talking rural Africans versus urban Africans, is a massive difference. So I would like to see how they're checking these figures. Okay, back into the reading. The study established that a Kenyan woman is more likely to be rendered a single mother by bearing a child out of wedlock than other, more unavoidable causes, like the death of a spouse or a divorce. One thing here, death of a spouse or a divorce. Death of a spouse is a situation where that's a widow. Single parenthood doesn't count widows and widowers. If your spouse died, you're not a single parent, in my opinion, in my what they think this word is supposed to mean. I know they might be changing it soon, but look, that's why there is the word widow and widower, because your spouse died. Divorce, yes, that's a single parent. Never getting married, yes, that's a single parent. But death of a spouse, widow or widower, unless I guess you had that kind of union. But then now we'll talk about marriage. What is marriage? The state marriage type of thing, that institution of marriage, started in the United States of America with situations of wanting to prevent interracial marriages and things like that, but now has grown into this situation of taxation and tracking people. But there are senses where people can be married in a more traditional sense that may not be counted in the same kind of way. They might be people who are in long-term partnerships that have agreed within themselves and their friends and their main circle, and they have stronger unions than people who have those official marriages and they hardly talk to each other and whatnot. So that could be an issue here that also goes into this. So back to the reading. In the 4 other countries in which the survey was conducted, death and divorce rank higher than premarital births as causes of single motherhood. Okay, role of the father. These new figures are likely to alarm traditionalists and provide yet more evidence of the rapid change in Kenyan family patterns. The role of the father in traditional African settings was considered vital in the upbringing of a child, and that was continued even under the nuclear family, which became common after the introduction of Christianity. The trend is also likely to cause head scratching among scholars to determine who is to blame for this phenomenon and why Kenya is faring worse than other countries in Africa. As I've mentioned before, I know this was in the summary, but there is something to do with articles that repeat things over and over again. And as I continue this series, I think I'll be pointing it out, how things are repeated. I don't know if this is a technique, is this filler? I guess in the past it might have been to fill columns in an actual space online. I mean, in newspapers to fill the number of pages that were needed, there was filler material. Or do people have to repeat things over and over again for people to actually understand? Because when it's online, you just put the page, you just have a shorter article. Well, anyway, back into the reading. Dr. Ken Ouko, a sociologist at the University of Nairobi, says that there are no easy answers, although he mainly blames the trend of irresponsible men who desert the women when told she's expecting their child. It's a quote. Women are caught in the web of premarital pregnancy, especially due to the irresponsible men who vanish and fail to commit, he said. But there is also a category of men who actually get married, and they then somehow just pack up and leave after birth. Professor Clark, one of the study's authors, told the Sunday Nation the survey examined the triggers for women being left to raise their children on their own. Kenya has roughly equal proportions of women becoming single mothers before marriage as those who become single mothers after marriage, primarily from divorce or separation, she said. And again, see, the divorce or separation. Okay, divorce or separation, yeah, that's in there. But I mean, here they're really talking about the men. They're failing to commit. The men are vanishing. They come into the situation. So there are sociologists here as well, but they're getting into this as well. Okay, let's keep going. Alarmingly, the study found that compared with children whose mothers were married since their birth, children in never married mothers faced a significantly high rate of mortality in Malawi, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. While the research offers scientific evidence of this trend, it only confirms a shift that has become more visible in recent times. A random look at profiles of most women in their 20s on social media, for example, shows that many comfortably claim the title of a mother and not a wife. Innumerable women are also posting pictures of their children while their relationship status on sites such as Facebook remains single. Okay, this is kind of funny. I mean, social media, some people talk about it, is crap and things like that, but I know some people don't change their status, they might not change it, so how much actual research is being done? But anyway, I think social networks are positive, more positive than negative, more information out there you can find research, so it's kind of interesting to see that they're actually being used, somewhat quoted for actual research. I wonder if it's actually in their thesis paper, like, we checked on Facebook and we checked 300 accounts. Some people just don't change their relationship status, even though they have changed. But you see here, they're talking about innumerable women are posting their pictures while comfortably, they comfortably claim the title of mother and not wife. And this is part of society. There is that aspect of society that has big upped single motherhood, single parenthood. President Barack Obama, it's like, I'm a child of a single mother. I was a proud child of a single mother. Even though the absent father, who is Kenyan of origin or citizenry or whatever, he was absent, but he's claiming that blackness from the father, even though he was raised by a white woman in Asia and Indonesia and things like that. I think it would have been better to say, look, this is a child of multiple cultures. This is a child that's come through struggles, not say like, look, this is big up, but this is the whole thing. White women is so great. Single white mothers are so great that they could even raise the first black president of the most powerful country in the world. So why wouldn't these women also be like, yeah, we single mothers too. We can do that. We don't need no man. And so are they really comfortable doing that? Are they comfortable claiming that title of mother and not wife? I don't know. But that's something to ask. Okay, back to the reading. There are children raised... Okay, back to the reading. However, women's rights advocates have rushed to caution against demonizing the institution of single-parent families. There are Kenyans raised by both parents who end up worse than those of single parents, said Anne Njogu, chair of the Center of Rights of Education and Okay, you see here, they're talking about don't demonize the institution of single parent families. First of all, that shouldn't even be an institution. That just should be a state of certain families somewhere. We've seen the figures. We've seen how much it goes. This education and awareness. We're going to raise the awareness and the education of most educated people vote for this. What does that mean? What does awareness mean? What does education mean? You can see some similarities in what education means here in Kenya as what it means in the United States of America, and it means jack squat pretty much. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just a placeholder. It's just something you kind of say out there and people are supposed to listen to. It's an appeal to authority, logical fallacy type of nonsense. But look, what are you talking about? Why are you here talking about we need to stop demonizing those? There are children raised by both parents who end up worse than those of single parents. Yes, we know that. What are the figures? Get the actual figures out there. What number? Is it 50 plus 1? Is it 50% plus 1? Is it 50% plus 1? Because if it's not 50% plus 1, then you can comfortably say, objectively in that sense, two parents are better than one. And anyway, if that single parent is a great person, then if that single parent had another great person that was attracted to that great person, to have that person together, that would be even better for that kid. So it's about crap parents. It's about, to my opinion, increasing something like peaceful parenting and things like that. And then you get into that situation. And with the lack of peaceful parenting, some of it comes from this. Some of it comes from the frustration of not having two parents in the house and things like that. And you get frustrated and then you take it out on the kids because you have issues in your life and you haven't dealt with them in a certain way. And this happens, this increases this cycle of just nastiness that goes on and on. And anyway, so yeah, no, demonize. We don't have to demonize, but we can say it's worse. Okay? Okay, getting back into the reading. In Kenya, the most affected are women in their late teens and their early 20s who are increasingly being left to raise children single-handedly after their male partners flee. And then this was page 1 of 2. When I clicked to go to the next, there was nothing. There's something wrong with the link and things like that. I tried to look online to find the rest, but that's it for now. So that's it for now. That was the reading of the article. As you can see, the article is right there. It says 1 to next. Then I clicked next. I don't know if you can see if it's going to focus on it. Click next. There was no more next in the thing. But as you can see, there's a lot of other articles lined up. So there's a lot of readings coming of things to do. Let me know if you like this. And on the screen right now, I'm going to put the Thomas Sowell 3, which is 3 questions economist Thomas Sowell asks. They're supposed to destroy liberal arguments. But I like asking them about other things. It's what solid proof do you have? At what cost? And compared to what? And I don't think any of those actual questions were answered by this article. And a lot of times when you talk about single parenthood and single motherhood, it's mostly, I think, gynocentric society just coming in and actually trying to defend the female in that situation, because the females are the controlling factor in reproduction in a sexually dimorphic species, which humans are. So that's the kind of thing. If we misidentify the actual issue, then we get into problems. What are we comparing this to when somebody's like, oh, this is compared to some other people in two-parent families have bad outcomes? Yeah, but what are you comparing that to? What's the actual number? What solid proof do you have? That's the thing. That's why I'm saying this is positive to start. This is getting this information out there, asking certain questions. But what are the answers? What solid proof do you have that this is just men abandoning their women? That was set up in the actual title. But how was that discussed? What are they abandoning? What are the values of the women? How are the women choosing? Because those men are not just coming and stealing these women. These women have some choice in those men that they deal with. But it comes to the point they haven't picked a certain man that does a certain thing and confirmed certain things about that man to assure whether they're going to actually be able to stay after the whole marriage. They might not have those discussions, and that's well and good. Sure, that's not just for the woman. The man should also be asking those questions too. I don't want to say the man has no responsibility, but he doesn't have all responsibility. That hasn't been set. There's no actual evidence of that. So what was it? Compared to what? What solid proof do you have? And at what cost was the third one. At what cost? And the cost is the kids. The cost is the life of the kids. I know they're talking about mothers in this situation, and I do think societies in general do big up grown women's feelings because, as I said, they're the key of reproduction over than they do the actual children that are dealt with those situations, that come out of these situations. But I think the cultures and societies that focus more on children are doing better. I think around the clock, if you just look at the way children are treated in cultures and societies that are doing better, I think that's the key thing. To me, peaceful parenting is one of the main things that I focus on. which comes from the non-aggression principle, the zero aggression principle. It's just the way to parent. It's the way to actually live and in a more positive way. And that's it for now. As I mentioned, if you haven't yet, subscribe and start more of these videos. Hit that notification bell. I think sometime back somebody had told me they weren't getting actual pings on my videos. I have very few subscribers right now, but try to get those numbers up. Share these with other people. Let me know what you think about this series. I'm going to try and be more regular with these things. As I said, got a lot of videos lined up. But anyway, goodbye.